Alright, so a little while ago I was making a video about the ZV-E10 and I included some wedding video footage that I had captured with this camera. And I got asked from a handful of people to see more of that footage and to talk a little bit about using a Sony ZV-E10 for wedding videography. So in this video we're going to be talking about the ZV-E10, the kind of footage you can get from this camera, and mainly should you use it for wedding videos. Alright, so everything you just saw was filmed on the Sony ZV-E10. The settings that I was using was HLG3, and I kept my shutter angle was 180 degrees, so basically means double my frame rate. So if I was filming at 60p, then I had a shutter speed of 120. If I filmed at 24, then I had a shutter speed of about 50, somewhere in there. Normal kind of settings, and then I just color graded in post. I was very careful to expose correctly, and I used Freewell variable ND filters on the front of the lenses. Now the reason I think the footage turned out really quite nice from this camera is actually the lenses. So I used these lenses. These are cinema lenses by Zhongyi, or Mitacon make them. They're called the Speedmaster series. They make a 20mm, 35mm, and a 50mm, and they open all the way up to T1.0. So it came in very handy to have that variable ND filter. But these give a very nice vintage, creamy kind of look to them. I also got a couple of shots with a Helios lens that give you that nice swirly background with a speed booster on it now, which I don't have here in the studio, but I can make a video about that if you're interested. But overall, yes, this camera can produce a nice image, and I think that footage turned out pretty good. Now, the real heavy lifter for this footage, though, was definitely the lenses. The lenses are the ones that give it the character and the style. At T1.0, they're definitely hard to get perfect focus, but when you're manual focusing, if you miss a little bit, it's actually not the end of the world. You can kind of make it look kind of nice. When autofocus misses, it hunts and kind of goes a little bit crazy. Manual focus is much more pleasing. So if you're ever interested in manual, either vintage or cinema lenses, definitely give them a go. Learning how to manual focus makes autofocus better as well. Just learning how a focus system should work allows you to sort of dial in your settings and use your autofocus more effectively. Now, whenever I did film this, I rigged up the camera a little bit. So one of the problems with this camera is it only has one SD card slot, so I actually used my Atomos Ninja with a nice handle and a cage for the camera. So I kind of had the camera rigged up like this, you know, so I got my Atomos Ninja. This acted as a backup recording, you know, the lens on here, a cage and a handle. This just made it a lot easier for filming. You know, I didn't add any V-mounts or anything like that because for a wedding, you really want to have a more handheld run and gun quick type of thing, and a big rig just would be too much. But this is kind of what I was going with. And again, look, this camera can capture a great image. It's got a good sensor in it, not the best sensor in the world, but you know, it's a cheap camera. It can produce a great image. In saying all of that, I would not recommend using a Sony ZV-E10 for weddings. Just because the camera can produce a good image and you can get a nice lens on it doesn't actually mean that it's going to be the right camera or the right tool for the job. A Sony ZV-E10 is designed for vlogging. It's designed for stuff that's not high risk. Okay, a wedding, you have like one chance to get high quality shots. You have one chance to get the first kiss. You got one chance for the bride to come down the aisle. This thing only has one SD card slot. That's why I included an external recorder, which is like $400, $500. Because if your SD card dies or fails, it's gone. You really need backup recording for that sort of shot. The battery life on this camera is not good, right? I went through so many batteries on this camera. So this is just an important point of conversation. Just because a camera can do a job doesn't mean that it's the right camera for the job. The ZV-10 is a great camera. I really enjoy it, and I think it's a fantastic camera for beginners, for YouTubers, for, you know, maybe even for like a high-end webcam, right? This makes a fantastic camera for that sort of job. But when it comes to professional work, you need to be using professional cameras. Now in the comments you might be saying, well Thomas, I can't afford an FX30, which to me I think the FX30 is a fantastic budget camera for weddings and for professional work. And granted, it's $1,800, right? Now the ZV-10 is $600. If you have a budget that is only $600 and you want to get started in weddings, this is your first camera, or you're looking to get your first camera to get started in wedding videography, I wouldn't recommend buying a ZV-10 to do that. What I would highly recommend doing is just rent an FX30 for a weekend. You know, do your first couple of weddings, or, you know, it's far cheaper. Just rent the camera for 1 or 2 weekends, get the weddings done, charge for the weddings when you can, right? Build up your experience and your portfolio, all that kind of stuff by renting equipment, high-end equipment, to get the best kind of footage with gear that is designed for that purpose. And then as you start working more, as you start getting more weddings and charging more clients, you're going to build up the funds to be able to buy the camera that you need. The last thing you want to do is buy a cheap camera that can capture a good image but might fail along the way. The battery might die halfway through the vows. You know, these are stresses that definitely came into play when filming. Now, at this wedding, this was not our main camera. All the shots that I showed you were captured with this camera, but I didn't rely on this as my main camera. That's just too risky in my opinion. So if you're looking to do professional work and you're just getting started and your funds only allow for a ZV-10, renting is the way to go. Now, if you have a ZV-E10 and you want to build up some, like a portfolio, you want to have some good shots and you want to get a couple of weddings under your belt that you can then present to future clients to say, hey, I can do weddings, then yeah, go ahead and do that. But I wouldn't say to charge full price, and I wouldn't be the main videographer on that job. I would see if you have any friends getting married and just be like, hey, would you mind if I ran around with the camera, got some shots, you can have full access to them, I'm not going to charge you anything, you know, still have their videographer do, you know, all of that stuff, but just something to get a few shots that you can present to future clients down the line. That's totally fine to do. Make sure you communicate with the videographer that that's what you're doing, and the worst thing you can do is get in their way, right? Photographers and videographers at weddings know this. Don't get in their way if you're learning and you're just getting some practice in. Just stay behind the scenes and try to get shots when you can. Build up your portfolio, build up a nice little reel, and once you're comfortable, present it to clients, let them, you know, charge them what you should for a wedding video, and use those funds to either rent or buy the proper kind of camera gear that you need to be able to film weddings effectively. So I hope this hasn't burst your bubble if you're a ZV-E10 owner. I do think this is a fantastic camera, but that doesn't mean that it should be used in every scenario. But I want to know your thoughts down below. If you're a seasoned wedding videographer, I'm sure you probably came into this video thinking, oh my goodness, he better not be recommending a ZV-E10 for weddings. No, I'm not, but I want to know your thoughts down below. If you're a wedding videographer, what gear do you recommend? Leave that in the comments down below, and make sure to go check down there for people's recommendations if you're just getting started. Weddings are great. They're a lot of fun. You can make decent money doing weddings as well, but it is high risk. So don't take a camera that is not going to be able to potentially hold up to those risks. So do let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, do hit the like button, or maybe even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. I appreciate all of you for doing so, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.